We on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot, season number 4, episode number 9. Oh yeah, man. First of all, I appreciate all the love and the feedback, man. I appreciate you guys' ear. Definitely if your first time listening, I appreciate the check-in. And man, we at the weekend, man, and got NFL, man, going into week number 5. We got college football getting knee deep. We got the WNBA playoffs jumping off. We got the MLB, Major League Baseball playoffs kicking off. And it's been an exciting tidbit leading up into the weekend. Hope you guys have had a great week. Hope you guys get an opportunity as well to kick back, let your head down, and enjoy this nice little slate across the sporting landscape. And from the college football tip, since it's on the top of the mind, great football game last week between the Georgia Bulldogs and the Alabama Crimson Tide. And usually this is a matchup that we see in the SEC championship game. But since we got the realignment of the SEC with new teams coming into the SEC, we get the regular season matchup between these two teams. And boy, was it an outstanding game. Oh, man, was it an outstanding game. Alabama pulling a rabbit out the hat at the end. Jalen Milroe definitely moved up the Heisman rankings with his performance last week. Georgia Bulldogs looked like they was going to get speedboated right out of the stadium. It was looking real ugly from a standpoint, but they was able to pick up the pieces and made a nice little comeback. Carson Beck, I mean, I was calling him Carson Balboa because he got off the deck. I thought he was dead out there, man. He got off the deck. Tried to have the Bulldogs come up with the epic comeback, and they fell up short. I think we'll definitely see these two teams potentially match up again down the road, whether it be the SEC championship game or the expanded college football playoff. And I'm still excited about that, especially with a 12-team slate. I can't wait, man, till we get down the road into that situation. But it was a good week. You know, Colorado had a nice little win against UCF. You know, they rolling now. You know, Prime Time and company definitely got a couple consecutive victories under their belt. And so they look like they've turning the page in Colorado. Look like they turning the page, man, for Prime and his young men out there in Boulder. And as I mentioned, the National Football League, we trekking into week number 5. There have been some teams who have been playing some good football with low expectations, and teams with high expectations not playing so good football. We definitely going to get into that coming up. And we had some unsavory news, man, across the sporting landscape. I know you guys have definitely heard. We had the passing of 2 gentlemen that definitely had an impact on their prospective sports, also outside the lines of sports. And so I'm going to start off with Dikembe Mutombo. Dikembe Mutombo. If you wasn't a fan of the National Basketball Association, you guys know who Dikembe Mutombo was, man. Just a finger wag. I mean, his commercials with Geico was outstanding. I thought that was a good look. Dikembe Mutombo, number 4 pick, 1991 NBA draft out of Georgetown. Now, I'm a huge college basketball fan, and I never forget when the late great John Thompson said, "I got a secret weapon." Now, mind you, at the time that Georgetown, they had Alonzo Mourning, special basketball player. When he came out of high school, Alonzo Mourning was the number 1 player in the country. And so, man, first time I seen Dikembe Mutombo play, I'm like, oh, man, they got 2 bigs that's putting in work. I mean, his ability on the defensive end, he definitely was raw on the offensive end, but he was an impactful guy from day one for the Warriors on the defensive end. Turned himself, into a decent offensive player to go along with that defense. Like I said, became the 4th pick in the 1991 NBA draft. But I think the indelible impression for Dikembe Mutombo, first and foremost, was out of all my years of watching the National Basketball Association, I've never seen a player do more for his country than I seen Dikembe Mutombo. A native of Zaire, built a hospital out in Zaire. I mean, this guy was a trendsetter. I mean, you guys are in the country of Zaire. I know you guys are in mourning. This gentleman was a king in Zaire, and just his ability to push forward just basketball on the continent of Africa overall. Obviously, we had some gentlemen before him, such as, Hakeem Olajuwon, but definitely, Dikembe Mutombo, pushed the envelope forward for African basketball. Had a chance to see him a couple times in person down here in the city of Atlanta. Called him at the gym, actually, ironically, a couple times. I mean, he had the biggest hands I've ever seen on a human being. And so, definitely condolences out to his family and loved ones and children and so forth and former teammates. Definitely, this guy was a stand-up guy. And to me, I think he was a better person than he was a basketball player. So, condolences once again out to the Mutombo family. Then we transition to a loss of another fellow Hall of Famer. This gentleman, I got an opportunity to watch this gentleman play towards the latter part of his playing career in the mid to late 1980s. Actually, this gentleman was the last guy that I seen that actually was a player manager. And that's Mr. Charlie Hustle himself, the late great Pete Rose, all-time hit king. I mean, Pete was a guy he probably was one of the most, if not the most competitive professional athlete I've ever seen, probably outside of maybe like a Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant. I mean, Charlie Hustle came to get it, whether sliding the first, just playing hard. Obviously, my OGs out there that follow Major League Baseball know about the whole situation in the All-Star game with him taking out Ray Fosse at the plate. And Pete, he was one of my favorite baseball players. Like I said, I had an opportunity to watch him play towards the latter part of his career, and he was a gamer. I mean, the best singles hitter I've ever seen. Him and Tony Gwynn, I mean, just their ability to drive the baseball, man, to get on base. Pete Rose, MVP winner, multiple world champion for two organizations, not only the great or the Big Red Machine in Cincinnati, but also two with the Philadelphia Phillies. Also too, another tidbit, another guy that, was a teammate of his who also has passed away, another Hall of Famer, Joe Morgan, had an opportunity to have a conversation several years back with Joe Morgan before his passing. Always spoke highly of Pete, and this definitely is a loss, and condolences out, to Pete Rose and his family. Obviously, we know the whole thing about the gambling situation with Pete Rose being banned from baseball. I think that Rob Manfred and the Major League Baseball people over there in New York, I think that they need to definitely put this man in the Hall of Fame. It goes without saying. I mean, he was a steward on the field. He did not cheat on the field at all. He gave every ounce that he had of his playing ability on the field. Was a pretty decent manager for the Cincinnati Reds. Obviously, they had a betting situation, kind of flushed that down the toilet. But now I just think that it's time, man, to put Pete into the Hall of Fame. So that's my look across the sporting landscape. And like I said, man, we got the WNBA playoffs, Major League Baseball playoffs kicking off. And definitely can't wait till we get down the road a little bit in those, definitely those, both of those playoff situations for those respective sports. And coming up, man, we're going to get into the National Football League week number 5, jumping off. Once again, I appreciate all the love and the feedback. I appreciate your ear. We on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot. Welcome back to We on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot. In week number 5 in the National Football League. We've had a month of football so far this season. There's been some surprises so far this season for teams that have came out of the box with low expectations, but they've been balling so far during the first 4 weeks. Also, we've had some teams that's been underwhelming so far. And before I get into the slate in week number 5, first, I want to talk about this whole Davante Adams situation out in Las Vegas with the Raiders. Obviously, Davante Adams asked for a trade out of Las Vegas for a lot of people, it's not really surprising. And that's me included in that. I think that Davante Adams, to me, going back to last season, I thought he had a foot out of the door out in Las Vegas. Derek Carr getting traded a couple years ago to the New Orleans Saints. He pretty much went out to Las Vegas for his old college teammate Derek Carr at Fresno State. They were putting in work. And once he moved on and, they playing the Gardner Minshew situation, and I just think that for Davante Adams, he's a guy that's, 32 years old, and he just wants to go to a winning situation. There's been a lot of speculation, especially with Adam Schefter thinking that it may be a deal with the New York Jets. I definitely wouldn't be surprised if he links back up with Aaron Rodgers. And for me, this is a situation where I'm going to say this is the new NFL, because we've seen, talented wide receivers and talented position skill players want out. They feel like the situation is not up to their liking. And I think Davante Adams is in the same situation, so I can't really fault him. I think overall he's handled himself like a professional, meaning that he's been, even with the speculation going back to last season, he's been kind of quiet in that. And for me, I just think with the Raiders, their offense has really been inept so far this season. They haven't been able to run the football. Gardner Minshew, who's what I call a 50-50 quarterback. For every week he looks like a competent quarterback, the next week he doesn't. And so I don't blame him for wanting out of Las Vegas. I think that the Raiders as an organization looks like they won't be in a situation where they'll be in the playoffs. Looks like they're gearing towards, one of the top picks in the NFL draft. And one caveat I will share with you guys, and I'm not sure if you guys was able to see this, but we had Deion Prime Sanders on Nightcap with Shannon Sharp and Chad Ochocinco, and they talked about the Raiders a little bit in this situation, obviously as far as them needing a stud quarterback out there. And Deion was real coy as far as, trying to keep it on the low, obviously, potentially trying to position Shedeur Sanders as being a top overall pick in this coming NFL draft, this coming April. And I think that for the Raiders, this is a microcosm of their organization. Antonio Pierce, I think, he's a leader of men. But I think it's a tough situation in in Las Vegas. And no disrespect to Oakland, because you guys have lost every professional sports franchise you guys have had. And, we talked about that, last episode and so forth. But, for Las Vegas, I just think that it's a situation where Mark Davis, the owner, I just think that, they got to get a better position as far as getting talent in Oakland. I do think that their defense isn't bad, but I just think on the offensive end, man, it's time to really hit the reset button on the offensive end. I think Jacoby Myers, the wide receiver out there opposite of Davante Adams, I think he's a talent. He's been putting in work for them over the last couple of seasons, but it ain't enough in the National Football League. And so you need studs at those skill positions. And I just think that the Raiders are lacking that. And, I can't blame Davante Adams for wanting out. We'll see where the chips may fall in this. He's been scratched for this week with a hamstring injury. I do think that that's kind of positioning by his agent as far as him, not wanting to, damage himself in a potential trade for his next organization. But we'll see how this thing unfolds, man. But it definitely was interesting as it came down the pipeline earlier in the week. And so now we're going to get into week number 5 across the National Football League. And we're going to get into game in the slate. We got what I call a breakfast game early, man, at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you're out on the West Coast, that's 6:30. Got to get up early for this one. We got the New York Jets taking on the Minnesota Vikings. This game has been played out in London across the pond. And the Jets, 2-2 on the season. They've been up and down. Last week, the offense was inept. Just couldn't get the wheels rolling on offense for the New York Jets. I can't say that I blame Aaron Rodgers, but I do blame Aaron Rodgers. At the end of the day, man, you got to be able to at least put up double digits on the scoreboard, man, and give your team a competitive chance. I think that the defense for the New York Jets played a good football game. Obviously, the vultures are circling around Robert Saleh, the head coach of the New York Jets, as far as his job is concerned. But for me, I'm not going to ring the alarm on the Jets just yet, because they were one of them teams that, as I predicted in my season preview, they could be a ticking time bomb as far as starting off slow in the beginning of the season and trying to pick up pace. They only a game out in the division in the AFC East. Buffalo took a L last week to the Baltimore Ravens. And so in this matchup, the Minnesota Vikings on the other side, they 4-0 the season. They living their best life on the season. Definitely one of the surprise teams across the National Football League. Sam Darnold on a redemption tour. This looks like remnants of Baker Mayfield last season. I mean, this guy has 11 touchdowns and 3 interceptions through the first month of the season. Aaron Jones, a lot of people thought he was washed. He went up in Green Bay, put in work. It was a good victory by the Minnesota Vikings up in Green Bay, as I predicted. In this game, Minnesota's a 2.5-point favorite. As I mentioned earlier, this game is going to be played in London. And I think the Jets bounce back. I think for them, the travel going overseas over to London from New York City, even though it's a nice little trip over the pond, as they would say, I think that they'll be able to pick up the pieces in regards of it. As I mentioned earlier, their defense has been playing okay so far this season. I think the offense is going to give them more than 9 points in this football game. I think Minnesota, they've been riding high, but I do think that the Jets have the ability from a talent standpoint, and I think they're going to be a little bit focused in this football game. I got the Jets actually knocking off the Minnesota Vikings in London. So we'll see what that thing do. Then coming up on the next slate is the Carolina Panthers. Travel to my hometown, Chicago, at Soldier Field to take on the Chicago Bears. The Panthers 1-3 so far on the season. My Bears 2-2 on the season so far. Panthers, they obviously made a change at quarterback a couple weeks ago. And the Red Rifle, he's been playing some good football for them, having the offense look like a real NFL offense. Carolina's in a situation where, to me, they really playing with house money, man. As I said a couple weeks ago, I thought this was the worst team in the National Football League. With Andy Dalton in place, they might level up from being the worst football team in the National Football League. As far as my Bears is concerned, there's been a lot of talk across the city of Chicago. And, with Caleb Williams and, is he progressing? Is the Bears doing right by him? I thought he's played well the last couple of weeks. The Bears, a huge victory last week. I thought the defense played well for the Chicago Bears. One thing that, to me, was the biggest question mark about my Bears so far this season was the ability to run the football and the play of the offensive line. And last week, we had both. Swift played great last week. I thought that the offensive line, they did their job. The Bears, ironically, in this game is a 4-point favorite at home. I think, in my opinion, the spread should be higher than this because I think the Bears do handle the business on the Carolina Panthers this week. For me, the Bears just got to watch out for what I call letting their guards down against the Carolina Panthers. This is the National Football League. But I do think that, as I mentioned, Caleb Williams, he's progressing. He got 3 touchdowns on the year so far and 4 interceptions, 787 yards passing so far on the season. I think that he's progressing in the right direction. And to me, it's really about the offensive line play for the Chicago Bears, meaning that we had to get some balance on offense, and that starts with running the football. I think it makes life easier for Caleb Williams. I think also, too, having Keenan Allen come back into the fold for the Chicago Bears is a good thing for the offense. I think the Bears knock off the Carolina Panthers up in Soldier Field. Then we got one of them AFC North tilts. Great division rivalry game. We got the Baltimore Ravens, fresh off their victory against the Buffalo Bills last week, taking on the Cincinnati Bengals, who picked up their first win last week. And this is going to be a dandy, man. I love these AFC North matchups. It's always bad blood, but good competitive football games. This game's going to be played up in Cincinnati. As I mentioned last week, the Ravens, to me, might have been the victory of the season so far, knocking off the Buffalo Bills. They pretty much steamrolled them. Derrick Henry, looking like old Derrick Henry, being able to run the football. Came up just short of 200 yards in that football game. I thought the defense for the Baltimore Ravens played some good football. And overall, I think that their defense is progressing in the right direction. I think the offense, for me, they've been able to run the football pretty well. And obviously, Lamar Jackson is, Lamar Jackson. But I think that for the Ravens, they still got some meat on that bone at the offense, meaning that being able to push the football downfield, incorporate guys like Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews has been straight on a milk carton. They got to get this man involved, and Rashad Bateman and so forth. So they just had to be a little diverse to me on offense. I like what I'm seeing from Justice Hill, too, being that spill back, being able to provide them a nice little punch when he come in the football game. And to me, especially when you're talking AFC North football, man, it's always really a pick'em situation. I think the Ravens come in this game with some momentum. I think that the Cincinnati Bengals, though, they know that they cannot fall to 0-4. They've lost their first 2 games at home. And I'm going to say this, because Baltimore is a 2.5-point favorite in this football game. I believe the Cincinnati Bengals win at home. I just don't see them losing 3 games out of this stretch at home. I just think that this is a divisional matchup. And I just think that the Cincinnati Bengals, from the offensive side, for them, I like their balance. And that's what we've seen from them the last couple of weeks, is the balance. Them being able to run the football with Chase Brown and Moss being able to be a good contributor for them. I just think that Joe Burrow, he's looking like old Joe Burrow. Jamar Chase looking like Jamar Chase. They had some outstanding chemistry. You look at T. Higgins, coming off the snide. He's been playing some good football since he's been back, being productive. And I just think the Cincinnati Bengals knock off the Baltimore Ravens up in Cincinnati. I do think this is going to be a very close football game. It's going to come down to the end, fourth quarter type situation. But I think the Cincinnati Bengals are able to pull this one off. Then we got the Miami Dolphins traveling up to Foxborough. This is another division slate, them taking on the New England Patriots. Both these teams come in on the season 1-3 on the season. The Dolphins is really life after Tua. Their offense last week pretty much was non-existent. And I think their offense may play better in this football game. Tyreek Hill, he's definitely been frustrated. The cheetah, he's been in the cage so far the last couple of weeks. And I think with the Patriots, from their perspective, Gerard Mayo, there's been not the biggest expectations from this football team, but I have been impressed so far from the Patriots defense so far this season. I think they've, given it all they got on the defensive end. Ironically, New England in this game is a 1-point favorite in this game. As you know, for me, with 1-point favorites, I look at this as a pick'em situation across the board. But I believe that the Patriots, I do think they hold serve at home. I think this game is pretty much a pick'em game. I think it boils down to the team that has the least turnovers. Jacoby Brissett, ironically, we can definitely say this, is that he's going to be the best quarterback on the football field. And to me, when we come to them pick'em games, I always side with the home team and who has the better quarterback, and that falls on the shoulders of the New England Patriots. I do think they win this game. I think it's going to be an ugly football game, but I got the Pats being able to handle that business at home against the Miami Dolphins. Then we got next slate. And this is an interesting football game, man. This game's going to be played in Landover, Maryland. As you guys know, especially the Commanders fans, the Washington Commanders taking on the Cleveland Browns. The Commanders have been the talk of the National Football League, 3-1 on the season. Jaden Daniels, the number 2 pick overall for them, has been playing some outstanding football. He only got 3 touchdowns, 1 interception so far on the season, but I think he's been good in playing ball control, taking what the defense is giving him, not playing over his head. B-Rob, Brian Robinson Jr. has been that good anchor in the running game for them. I think that is crucial for their success so far this season. And I just think that for me, on the Brown side, they're 1-3 on the season. Deshaun Watson has looked like a shell of himself. This team, their running game has been aight. And, word on the street is Nick Chubb is getting close to coming back for the Cleveland Browns. Looks like he may be a couple weeks away from getting back in the lineup. I think that I add them a pop. The defense to me, I had high hopes on this Cleveland Browns defense because they've been pretty consistent just about over the last couple of years on the defensive end. And I just think that for them, Myles Garrett, obviously I consider him the best defensive football player pound for pound in the National Football League. No disrespect to TJ Watt up in Pittsburgh, but he's nicked up a little bit. And I think the Commanders, they own one, man. They a 3-point favorite in this football game. I do think that the Commanders handle the business in this football game against the Cleveland Browns. But I think this is a test game for Washington, meaning that they've been getting a lot of positive press. This game is played at home in their building. I think that the Browns, they're sleeping giant from a standpoint of they can come into Washington and potentially knock off the Commanders. But I'm going to side with the Commanders in this, man. I think that the Washington Commanders pull out this game. I think Jaden Daniels is a little bit more suited to throw the ball down the field in this football game. And so I got the Washington Commanders moving on in this one against the Cleveland Browns. Then we got an AFC South matchup. We got the Indianapolis Colts 2-2 on the season versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are winless on the season, 0-4. This game is played down in Jacksonville, Duval County. And Jacksonville, to me, I already put it out there, man. I think Doug Peterson is a dead man walking. I think Trevor Lawrence, if you look at Trevor's stats so far this season, it hasn't been that bad. I mean, this guy has 4 touchdowns and an interception on the season. But as they say, the eye test. And he looks like he's losing confidence. I do like what I'm seeing from Brian Thomas Jr., that first-round pick out of LSU. You know, he's been playing some good football this season. I think he's a positive on the offensive end. But Jacksonville, they really haven't been able to run the football. And so they've been off balance. I expected a little bit more from Travis Etienne. He hasn't really played well so far this season. Tank Bigsby came in and did a good job last week, taking over a little bit of that running back duties for them. And Jacksonville's a 3-point favorite at home. And to me, I think that's all predicated on the health of Anthony Richardson. I think that the coach, obviously they got Jonathan Taylor in the fold too on the offensive end, Michael Pittman. I just think that, to me, this is kind of what I call one of them uncertain games. I'm going to go with Jacksonville. And the reason I'm going to go with Jacksonville, I just think that they've been hearing a lot of the noise. They 0-4 on the season. To me, when you're winless on the season, the best thing you want to do in that situation is get you a home game, especially a division home game. And obviously with Anthony Richardson being potentially 50-50 to start, looks like he may be fine and playing in this game, but he hadn't played good football either so far this season. He's been a turnover machine. And so I'm going to go with Jacksonville in this one. I think that they win their first game of the season down in Duval. Then we transition to 2 teams that I think potentially can meet up in the AFC playoffs down the road. We got the Buffalo Bills coming in 3-1 on the season. Just took an L to the Baltimore Ravens. We got the Houston Texans being 3-1 on the season so far. Obviously, we got Josh Allen and C.J. Stroud. Definitely a good quarterback matchup. It's going to be a game I'm definitely going to be tuned into. This game's been played down in Houston. Buffalo, ironically, is a 1-point favorite in this football game. As you know, I usually choose 1-point spreads as pick'em games, and I usually default with the home team, which would be Houston in this situation. I believe that Houston, to me, I think they do win this football game. And the reason why is that I think that from the Houston standpoint it's really about their defense. And I think that they have the ability to potentially stifle the Buffalo Bills. I mean, Josh Allen has put on the cape so far this season, but it's hard to put on that cape every single week. I still think that their offense is, I wouldn't say they're a work in progress, but they still have a bunch of young, new guys in the fold on the offensive end. James Cook has played some good football so far this season. I think they have more of a balance, what you would want to see. Obviously, they changed offensive coordinators last year after they showed Ken Dorsey the door, brought in Brady as the offensive coordinator. So I do see the diversity in that offense a little bit, but I just think, man, Houston playing at home, I think that their defense is going to step up in this football game, and I think that the Houston Texans win this football game, man, down in Houston. Then we got the Las Vegas Raiders taking on the Denver Broncos in a divisional matchup. This game is being played out in Denver. And Denver's coming in this game as a 2.5-point favorite. I'm going to keep it real about the Denver Broncos. I want to throw them in the trash after the first 2 weeks of the season. But I'll tell you, with this football team, I like what I see from the defensive end from the Denver Broncos. Obviously, they had an outstanding game last week against the New York Jets. I mean, they held the New York Jets straight in check in that football game. You got a rookie starting quarterback in Bo Nix. I think that with rookies, man, it's game by game with these guys. The more experience they got, or the more experience that they have, they're able to give you kind of a better performance. The Raiders, man, they riding on fumes right now. We got the whole situation with Devontae Adams asking to be out. He's not going to play in this football game. And Denver's a 2.5-point favorite in this football game. I just think that their defense is playing so good football that I think that they hold the Raiders in check offensively. And I'm going to keep it short and sweet in this one, man. I got the Broncos handling their business out in Denver in this football game. Then we got the Arizona Cardinals traveling out to Santa Clara, taking on the San Francisco 49ers. The Cardinals 1-3 so far on the season. San Francisco 49ers 2-2 on the season. Last week, the Cardinals got DDT'd by the Washington Commanders in that football game. I mean, man, boy, they defense was straight trash last week. And so they played the San Francisco 49ers. As you guys all know, C-Mac is out. You know, we got Deebo Samuel back in the fold last week. I think he showed a good pop. You know, Jordan Mason has came in and has been putting in that work for the San Francisco 49ers through the first month of the season without C-Mac. And this is a huge spread in this football game, man. They got the Niners a 7.5-point favorite in this football game. I think that's predicated simply just on the inept defense of the Arizona Cardinals. I just think that for them, Kyler Murray, he's been up and down, man. And that's been really since he got broke off with that big bag of money for the Cardinals. He's been up and down to me, man. Some weeks this guy looks outstanding. Then other weeks he looked like a straight dud, man. Just not, to me, focused or in the football game. I think that for the Cardinals, any chance for them to win this football game, man, it's going to be a balanced offense on the ground with Connor, you know, Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, he's been showing his worth. Had a TD last week for them. But I'm going to side with the San Francisco 49ers in this football game. I'm not sure, though, if the Niners will be able to cover this spread in this game because it's 7.5 points. I think that it may be a little bit closer than advertised, but I just think the experience of, you know, Kyle Shanahan, head coach, and just this football club for the San Francisco 49ers, I think they got just enough to be able to knock the Cardinals off at home. Then we got the Green Bay Packers, man, traveling out to Inglewood, California, SoFi Stadium to take on the Los Angeles Rams. The Packers 2-2 on the season. Rams 1-3 on the season. Packers last week, man, they started off slow. I mean, Jordan Love, he started off slow. Had 2 interceptions early in the football game last week, and he straight hit the button after that. Oh, my Lord. I mean, he straight hit the button. Ended up with four touchdowns last week and 3 interceptions last week game. Los Angeles Rams, man, they're walking wounded. Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua still out. You know, it's really been Matt Stafford trying to create. Kyron Williams would play some good football so far this season for them, trying to hold the offense down. You know, the Rams took an L last week to my Chicago Bears. You know, Sean McVay, man, it's a scheme-up situation for him, man. He's one of the most intriguing minds across the National Football League. We got Matt LaFleur for the Green Bay Packers. You know, he's a scheme-up type of guy as well. Both these guys are friends, so it's a good friendly matchup at the head coach position. Green Bay is a 3-point favorite in this football game, which to me, I think that, you know, the Packers, they're one of those football teams where you got to watch the Packers week to week. And Jordan Love obviously got broke off with that big bag of money. But the interesting thing about the Packers to me so far this season, they really haven't been able to run the football to my liking. Josh Jacobs, he had a good first week, but ever since week number 1, he's been kind of mitigated a little bit in the running game. You know, they've been trying to be diverse as far as from an offensive standpoint. Obviously, having Jordan Love back last week was huge for them. I think that for me, I think the Packers win this football game traveling out to Inglewood. I think this is going to be an extremely close football game. As I mentioned, Green Bay is a 3-point favorite in this one. I think it's going to go along the lines of the spread. I think it's going to be a one-possession football game. It's going to come down to the end in this one, but I got the Packers, man, knocking off the Los Angeles Rams out in Inglewood. Then we got the New York Giants taking, man, a long trip from New York City or New Jersey, from MetLife Stadium premises all the way out to Lumen Field out in Seattle to take on the Seattle Seahawks. The Giants 1-3 on the season. The Seahawks 3-1 on the season. Seahawks took their first L last week. They tried to come back in a good football game with the Detroit Lions, man. I thought that for me, it was a good game, especially in the second half, man. One of the most entertaining games of last week. Seattle, man, a huge favorite in this football game, 6.5 points. I mean, the Giants, their offense is really, from the offensive standpoint, Malik Nabers has been that guy. You know, I do like what I see from Wan'Dale Robinson, though, the other wide receiver. I think he's been a good contributor, especially in the short passing game, you know, just opposite of Malik Nabers. As you guys who have been a fan of the show, and I appreciate you guys, you already know how I feel about Daniel Jones. I just don't think that this guy's a starting quarterback in the National Football League. And so for me, for the New York Giants having to travel way out to Seattle, especially with Seattle taking an L, and with the pop that I've seen from the Seattle Seahawks offense, I think Seattle wins this football game. I just think that, to me, also too, from Seattle's perspective, I think you'll get a better defensive outing, as they didn't have a good defensive game last week. So I think the defense will play a little better. Geno Smith is not bashful throwing that football down the field. I think that Kenneth Walker III coming back was a huge level up for them on the offensive end, get them a little bit more balance, even though they threw the ball almost 60 times last week. But I got the Seattle Seahawks, man, being able to knock off the New York Giants in this game out in Seattle. Then we got the Dallas Cowboys, man, taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. This game is played in Pittsburgh. You know, if you guys are old enough, you remember that these two teams were one of the biggest rivalries across the National Football League, especially in the 1970s, playing in Super Bowls twice in that 1970s decade. And the Dallas Cowboys come into this week 2-2 on the season. The Pittsburgh Steelers 3-1 on the season. I think with the Cowboys, as they say, London is falling. This team hasn't been able to run the football at all. And I can't blame this on Dak Prescott, because I think Dak Prescott has been gamed and he's been trying to win as much as he can in these football games. But to me, they really got one receiver, no running game. I think Jake Ferguson, he can be, and add you a little bit of pop on that offensive end. This defense has been straight garbage. They haven't been able to stop the run. And I've said this for the last 2 years about the Dallas Cowboys. They're small up front and they cannot stop the run. And that has stifled them big time. I thought last season their defense was fool's gold, getting all those turnovers, converting them into scores. But we're not seeing that this season. And the running game is just, the defense of the running game has been straight trash. And I just think that we're going to see that whole situation again this week, because I think that Baltimore, Mike Tomlin, man, he's one of the best head coaches in the National Football League. I think they'll be able to try to play that, what I call three yards to the cloud of dust, a running game with Harris. I think that Justin Fields, he's been living his best life so far. They haven't asked a whole lot out of Justin Fields. He actually, too, and I'll throw this little thing out here for you guys about Justin Fields. Do you know that last week he threw for over 300 yards? That's the first time this man has thrown for 300 yards. And so I think that for him, the whole quarterback controversy with him and Russell Wilson, I think that is definitely over. I think that the Steelers will be focused, especially on the defensive end. And I just think that for me, especially with Dallas having some nicked up guys on the defensive end, especially with Parsons, I don't expect him to play this week, and I think he's going to be out several weeks for them. That's a huge loss for the Dallas Cowboys. I got the Pittsburgh Steelers winning this football game, and Mike Tomlin improving his team to 4-1 on the season. Pittsburgh, ironically, is a 2.5-point favorite in this football game also. I think that this game will be close, but I do think that the Pittsburgh Steelers will hold serve at home, man. And then we got the Monday night slate, man. Monday night slate, prime time. We only got one Monday night tilt this week. We got the New Orleans Saints taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs, 4-0 so far in the season, man. This team has gotten injuries after injuries after injuries, and they just always find a way to win football games. As you guys know, Rashee Rice, not going to play in this football game. He's going to be out for several weeks. A lot of people suspecting that it's an ACL situation. I don't think that has been officially confirmed. It looked real bad when I saw the game, and I was just like, oh, man. So, for them, it's an interesting situation. Now, for the Saints, this team, after the first 2 weeks of the season, looked like they had the best offense in the National Football League. The last 2 weeks, offense has just hit a rut. They've hit an iceberg. And I believe that, for me, I will say this. I think that on paper, the Saints have the better offense. I think that Alvin Kamara has been Alvin Kamara so far this season. Derek Carr's been a mixed bag, especially over the last 2 weeks. And I just think that at the end of the day, the Kansas City Chiefs, man, they just find a way to win. And I think they still find a way to win, man, especially playing at home. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Saints pull a rabbit out of a hat, man, and knock off the Chiefs. But the Chiefs, they're 5.5-point favorite in this football game. And I just simply believe that at home, man, they just got winning psychology, man, across the board. And that's credit to Andy Reid, man. And so I think that they win this game and they improve themselves to 5-0 on the season. So that's my look across week number 5 in the National Football League. And we'll see, man. I hope you guys, first and foremost, sit back and relax and enjoy this tilt. You know, it's been a long week, and so Sundays always provide, just a little comfort before we get back for most of us into the work week, into our daily grind. Once again, man, I appreciate you guys, and if it's your first time listening, man, I appreciate all the love and the feedback, and I appreciate you. Yeah, and hope you guys have a great weekend. We on Fire Sports Podcast.